This is Councilmember Victor Jones, Chairman of the Public Safety Committee for the City of High Point. Today is Wednesday, October 9th, 2022. We've only got one item on the agenda. As this committee is both proactive and reactive, we have kind of a both approach here. Response to some issues that have been going on in the city, but also to discuss what we are doing ahead of time to prevent them. So we've got two people presenting today. Our first and only item on the agenda today. Oh, before I do that, I am here present in the chambers. The only other member of my committee here is Councilman Tyrone Johnson. The mayor should be joining us in a minute for quorum should we need to take any action. I don't anticipate that, but also in the council chambers, we also have Councilmember Michael Holmes as well. So with that, we'll go to item 2022-495, discussion on neighborhood crime concerns. And first will be our police chief, Travis Stroud.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. I have at least three issues, probably more as we keep going, to discuss. The ones that were brought to my attention were the 800 Quaker Lane, 410 Gatewood, and 1010 Rotary Drive are what I brought to the table to discuss today, but I'm sure there'll be more that spawns off of that. So I'll sort of go in line with it. In the 800 Quaker Lane stuff, if that's what you want to call it, we began having issues. I was notified about it early in September, just before the start of school, through High Point Friends. And a lot of our active shooter presentations, we made connect with them over there, and they said they had an issue with a homeless individual that was set up a camp on the edge of their property. And as it transpired, it got a little worse. They tried to work with the individual, and he kept, well, basically just trespassing on their property and leaving a lot of used needles and things like that, where their kids could get hold of them, or it was just basically a dangerous situation. So we started paying more attention to it as a police department. The complaints sort of ramped up from High Point Friends School over there and the church as well. So we started having to address it more and more. Our officers did go out several times to address this. They pretty much were point blank. Yeah, it's a bad situation. A lot of destruction going on their property. They called it a hazmat in our terms. Situation with the amount of stuff that had been left on the ground. We were able to end up identifying our offender. And every time we would come, of course, he would bail. He would run. It's not hard to figure out when a blue and white pulls up. So he would bail, and we could never really get our hands on him while we were there to actually arrest him for trespassing. So we have ultimately ended up identifying him, and we drew a warrant on him. We felt like there was enough. The staff had done enough telling him they didn't want him to be on the property. And we felt it's a second-degree trespass. We ended up drawing a warrant on him. We arrested him elsewhere in the city, maybe a couple of days later. Since then, our problems have declined over there, but that doesn't alleviate your problem. This is where the bigger issue comes in. He had set up, in short, maybe I guess if you want to call it a homeless camp, that's what we refer to in all of our notes, in their wooded area back there. And really, we never get just one individual at these. And ends up multiplying in individuals, and the problem gets worse and worse. Now, I know several times our officers went out there, there were other individuals there other than the guy we were looking for. They always claimed to be trying to clean up the property, clean up that property, or take down his tents and things like that. The problem is they're still there too. So since then, I checked in our stuff today. We haven't had calls on this particular incident over there since we've arrested McPherson. That's his name. All arrests are public records, so it's Ryan McPherson. I checked today, he is probably out. He's not on the jail roster as of today, so he's out somewhere inside the city, I would presume, at the moment. But we haven't had any more problems on Quaker Lane regarding that. Now, we did have a break-in on Saturday night at 818 Quaker Lane, just right across the street from the school. That was at 2-something in the morning. I don't think it has anything to really do with this incident at all, but we did make an arrest in that case within the hour and charged the individual with second-degree burglary that night. But I don't think it's got anything to do with the Quaker Lane stuff. It didn't appear to be, from what I can tell, a homeless individual or anything like that at all. So now there's probably some drug and stuff involved because we did pull needles off of him and things like that during the arrest. So I'm sure there's a connect in there on that side, but I don't think it's specifically involved in the camp. Yeah. So that's where we stand on Quaker Lane. Of course, we're checking that school. Quaker High Point Friends is part of our check we do every single day in our school special checks. So we're having officers by there on a daily basis. But those are spot checks, just making sure, well, we're trying on the school safety side. So they'll check the other property the best they can while they're there. The next one, 410 Gatewood. This was started early summer for me. I started getting emails from concerned citizens who lived in the neighborhood, and I won't use anybody's name, but they were emailing me directly saying that they had an issue in their neighborhood, and it really ramped up rather it centered around 410 Gatewood, a house that was there. It was being operated by GC Stop. They said they had seen, they tried to tie it together, saying they'd seen an uptick in people wandering the neighborhood, increasing car B&Es and things like that, activity in the evening and nighttime and early morning hours. And they were asking us to sort of increase our patrols over there. So we did. We end up, understanding that the house at 410 Gatewood was being used by GC Stop. At one point in time was a needle exchange. I think that has since ceased. They're not doing that activity there anymore. I think at one point in time it was going to be sort of I don't want to call it a shelter, but a place for women to hold up. And I think that may have been ceased now as well, according to the email I saw earlier this week. So I'm not really sure the status of 410 Gatewood, but it did generate a pretty substantial number of complaints from the citizens. They were definitely concerned about their neighborhood safety. They were pretty graphic in what they were seeing out there in the street and the people they were dealing with. The exact words they were using with me were, "We're seeing a bunch of zombies walking around in the street at night and early mornings." So that's coming straight from them. So again, we increased our patrol in there, and I'm sure our presence will tamp down some things, but we're not going to be able to be there all the time. It's just impossible for us to do that with the volume of calls we get inside the city. So on the 410 Gatewood, I'm hoping that since the residence is, from what I can tell, is not going to be used for these activities anymore, it may stop what they're looking at. Now, I don't guarantee that. It's going to take weeks before you actually can look at a true sample to see if your call volume is going to drop or what the neighborhood complaints are. Neighbors could probably tell you more than I could. 1010 Rotary. This was a specific drug complaint where residents who were renting a room at 1010 Rotary, they were renting a room in the basement from an elderly female, were having their drug dealer meet them at another location, and the drug dealer was walking through the yards, people trespassing through people's yards to make the exchanges and things like that. Our officers went over and did a knock and talk at 1010 Rotary. We made contact with the elderly female, sort of kept her abreast of what was going on, what her tenants were doing. She ended up kicking them out. Since then, they have vacated that residence, the two people that our contacts with, and we have another call at 1010 Rotary. I checked today. So we're hoping that problem has sort of fixed itself. The problem is, our two people went somewhere else as well. Generally, trouble goes wherever the individual is. It's just the way it is. So we got to figure out where that spot is. But hopefully the 1010 Rotary side is done from this point in time, but I can't tell that. You have questions for me?
What are the main, obviously all this stuff is criminal in some ways, but what are the main dangers that we're seeing, like, as regards to public safety? I know what happened with the break-in just because I know that person personally. But what else are we seeing that this causes?
Well,
Are they robbing people?
well, I don't think it's coming to that level. I don't think these folks are doing that. I think that may happen. And I'm going to turn it down into more of like a homeless camp issue, if I can trace it back. We'll get back to just to Quaker Lane. That became a homeless camp thing. And I have a map here with me, and I'll give you a copy of it so you can look at it. I brought several. So everywhere you're looking on that, sorry. So everywhere you see on that map, let me back up a little bit. We started noticing a serious uptick in our homeless population and the crime that was associated with a lot of these individuals and where they were staying probably many moons ago, but I really traced it back to the start of 2021 to run the data for today. So we started actively tracking our homeless population and the camps that were popping up throughout the city. Because a lot of these camps, what they do is they'll set up camp in a wooded area or some sort of lot wherever somebody else's property that someone else owns. I don't care if it's a wooded lot or vacant or anything. Somebody owns that property, and they don't have the right to do this. But we were also noticing crime trends that upticked in the area, vandalisms. And I wrote them down there on the thing. You can see. I made note, homelessness is not a crime.
Right.
So That is not the issue, but it's what comes with that and what people bring with it. We were having a lot of panhandling calls, aggressive panhandling calls, which is a violation of the law. We have a city ordinance against that. We had all kinds of trespassing calls. We had tons of banned subject calls. These are people who have trespassed in the past. Businesses or individuals have banned them from their property, and they've gone through the proper steps, which means we can arrest them on site for secondary trespass without having anything else to go with. Tons of public disturbances, and a lot of drug-related calls that went with this. And it was quite a bit of regressive behavior too, depending on who the individual is. A lot of it was in the actual community on the aggressive behavior inside of our homeless camps. They're fighting each other. We had almost had a homicide in one, on a stabbing. We didn't have a homicide in one. We had 2 beaten to death in different camps downtown last year or year before. I get my years mixed up. But you can see on the map, everywhere you see a purple X is where we have marked or located some sort of homeless camp inside the city. So you don't have to count them. That's like 53 or 54 of them right there. Now, not all of them are active at all times. They will be pretty transient. That's the nature of the business. We'll go clean them out or tell them they got to leave, and they will leave. They're just going to go somewhere else. So as you can see, the Main Street corridor is our biggest issue. I mean, we're running from all the way to South Main to North Main. We got camps all over the place in there. Sometimes there's 1 or 2 in the camp, and sometimes there's many, many more. It's hard to get a gauge on numbers. We started doing field sheets on these. Field sheets for us are it's how we address a call for service when we can't put it in an actual incident report. So it gives us some way to track. We started tracking our homeless population in there, so it's been very beneficial. You know, just since the start of 2021, we've done 332 field sheets on just the homeless population. Now, a lot of times when our officers get there, it's important to note that we will change the classification based on what we get to. I mean, there could be a drug issue, something else that goes in, so I can't trap all of these field sheets that are dedicated to these folks or these camps because I can only see the ones that go strictly to the homeless population. But there could be tons of other things that we could reclass them. And I wanted to be reclassed for what they actually run into. That's how we get data and we derive it. But this is where you run into problems. It's hard to connect the dots on those when you have different classifications. So you can see there's a lot of them in there. And this is exactly what I see with Quaker Lane. I mean, people come in, they take over property, they destroy it. And again, I'll mention this again. This is someone else's property. And then when these folks leave, do whatever, guess who's left for cleanup? The property owner, which is just boils my blood, quite honestly. I just cannot stand this doing to our citizens. But we're very limited on what we can do. So I've given direction to all our people when we have these kind of violations. You know, I'm not a heartless individual. I mean, but our job is to fight crime. And one of the major modes to fight crime is to arrest people and charge people, whatever it may be. So all our people are under pretty specific direction right now. We've cut breaks, we've worked deals, we've tried to be empathetic, we've tried to get people here, try to get people there, let's get you out of this system. And there's some success stories in there. I don't want to displace that. I think it's very important to note some people take advantage of this and they go to different things. I'm sure it's not that easy just to get out of this game. I don't want to make it sound like it is. But the problem is I'm still getting calls and complaints from our citizens, and the accusation is every time the police aren't doing their job. And so I said, well, we're going to do our job. We're going to charge people when we have probable cause to do so from this point forward. It can even be on a citation, in my opinion. When everybody has to go in front of the magistrate, because we understand the magistrate and the courts and the jails are overwhelmed, and they're probably not going to give them a bond anyway for these lower level charges. But our people are under the direction to make these charges. So that's what we're operating in right now. Does it make a difference or not? I have no idea in the grand scheme. I know we're doing our job at the end of the day, though. But the whole purpose of doing a job is to correct a problem, and I'm really not sure we're doing that right now. So it's like 1 step forward, 2 steps back. It really is. But as you can look on the map, you can see the problem just like I do. This is big. This is a quality of life issue, in my opinion, for our city that is bad. And I'm not really sure, as the chief of police, how to correct that problem. I think there's going to have to be a lot of people step up to the table who can provide resources that we cannot. Simple as that. I mean, this is not one of the things that we're going to be able to solve as a police department. We'll do our part, and we definitely want to do our part if we can get other players at the game to figure out how we can help to be a true piece of the puzzle that gets answered here. But this problem is only going to get worse. Again, all of you have heard me say, use the West Coast as your example. That is not where we want to be. That is not where we want to be. Right now, a lot of the camps are, they're hidden. if you want to say, back in the woods, out of sight, out of mind type things. Well, that's not the case in the West Coast, is it? They're out front, they're in our parks, in the front parking lots of businesses and everything on. They've taken over streets. That is not where we can be as a city. It is just detrimental. I can tell you a line right there, you take out livable. That happens to us. You can mark livable off the little saying there, because it won't be like that. Our citizens will not stand for it, nor should they. So we're going to do our job. We're going to continue to do our job. Yes, our call volume's through the roof, and our staffing is historically low. I hate to say that, but it's my job to be honest. So we're trying to address these things if we can. But then again, in the grand scheme of things in court, when you get a second-degree trespass that rolls up in front of the DA, and we got all these other things going on, I'm sure this doesn't have a lot of teeth that goes with it on the other side. And it's not a knock on them. It's just they're overwhelmed at the court as well. Does that answer your question, Councilman
Very
Jones?
much. I don't know if you would, either you or Ms. Wilson, but like, do we have any estimates of what the population is of this homeless community that's in High Point? Like, how many people are we talking about in our city limits?
I bet it's quite a few. I could probably get the number because Captain Wiesner's done a great job of sort of tackling this. One of our first shift supervisors working on a day shift hours that allows him to get out there and see the camps during daylight hours and get heads. We just went around. We just took a group not too long ago. I don't remember who it was, and did a head count. I don't know if you want to call it a census of the homeless population. I don't remember what the numbers were. I could probably look it up and tell you, but it was not. The number was not small.
I'd like to get that number at some point, just to kind of have an understanding of it. Any other council members have questions for the chief?
Yeah, this is Councilman Johnson. You may know, you may not know. Do we know why, any rhyme or reason why, most of the cluster is right here? That's about half, I was counting over here, 20-something.
South Main, the old Cloverleaf type area.
Walmart.
Well, there's
Walmart area.
one of them. A lot of resources down there. I mean, you see the camps are running along the north-south corridor.
Yes.
It's easy access to resources, people. I mean, a lot of the people that you see panhandling, these are our folks. Where are they going to go? To our major intersections, which are going to run off of Main Street. You're going to have your higher volume places, your box stores. Look at up north. Where's the other big cluster? Right, I hate to say it, but Vic's right. Right around Walmart are our big box stores. Those are the ones we have our major larceny problems at and our retail thefts. There's no way you can tell me they're not combined. Ain't no way. Been doing this a long time. So I'm not saying they're responsible for all of it. Absolutely not, because a lot of people come to this city to do crime. But as you can tell, that's a hot spot for us. Now, with the cleanup of the Cloverleaf, that part has helped. The problem is, it's not like all of a sudden people went out and got a house or home. They moved somewhere else.
You referring to Walmart?
What?
Walmart?
Yeah. I wish I could get rid of both Walmarts. I would, just for the record. And I'm just kidding. I like Walmart. They do good business, but they do drive us crime quite a bit.
Yeah.
So with the cleanup of the Cloverleaf, and the new exchange in there, it able to clean up a lot of things for us. Problem is, those people didn't leave. They just went somewhere else. So.
True.
Well, I just remember we did that. You briefed us on, I don't know, 6 months or a year ago, something on where our stats were in the city, and they were all, most of them were right around the Walmart South Main, and then second to that was up here in North Main, just because, and they weren't, violent stuff. It was mostly petty crimes and everything, but where there's a lot of foot traffic, there's a lot of, you're gonna have crime and other things. It becomes an area, so.
Well, Vic, you're right. Councilman Jones, you're right. If you laid a heat map on our city, depending on what cause you put in for the heat map, and we laid it down over the top of this map right here, we would have glowing red, yellow around that 2700 block, maybe 2300 to 3000 block of North Main Street, and then the 2600 block of South Main Street would all be property crime related. And then probably if I had to put a heat map on violent crime stuff, it'd be near the intersection. If you dig a big radius, maybe University and Green. So yeah, none of that's changed. I guarantee you, whatever stats we ran, and I remember doing that, if we did them again today, the heat map would almost replicate.
Yeah.
Which I don't like, because we're very data driven, so we know where we need to concentrate our people and our efforts. It's just getting all that together with your resources that are available to actually make a difference on it. So.
I guess my last question, just because I don't know the answer, is I know like Ms. Kleinfelter's here, a couple other people that with response to some of the things where it's affecting public safety, where someone feels unsafe. I'm not, people breaking into cars and all that type of stuff, that's where it crosses a whole different line. Is there anything else that we could do, or are we doing everything in your perspective that we can do to prevent that and get those people off the streets and away from the law-abiding citizens?
Well, that'll be a big push to the end of the year. Always around the end of the year, the November, December timeframe is when we see an uptick in a lot of these crimes. You got your holidays and people are out and stuff like that. So we'll make a big push as a police department to be out and about in those areas the best we can with our staffing. We'll do a lot of public service stuff, trying to keep people aware. And I think that is the biggest thing. They got to need to be aware. Now, on the other side, we got to let offenders know. There's two pieces of this puzzle. You got victims. There's always, to have a victim, what you got on the other end? An offender. I want all of our offenders to know, yeah, we're going to arrest you. We're not going to be soft on crime here. We're going to stop people for this. We're going to stop. If it's a law in the book, I think it's open for us to charge as long as we have probable cause, and we're going to do that. I think that's what we owe it to our citizens. So I'm hoping that approach go a long way, but I don't know what the city could do. To answer that, that's tough.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about 57 square miles of a city, 116,000 people to get in tune with some things. But, I can't attest to everyone's level of, do I feel safe or unsafe?
Sure.
I think that goes to the individual. I mean, for me versus somebody else, I don't feel too unsafe, I'm fine, but somebody else may not.
Yeah, this is Councilman Holmes. I think what we're talking about here is we're really having two different discussions. We're talking about immediate impact and reduction, and we're talking about long-term.
Yep.
We're talking about long-term solution to this problem. I think if we're talking about long-term solution, then we have to have wraparound services. We have to have housing. We have to have a foundational infrastructure to be able to meet the needs of these populations. We have to have drug services. We have to have workforce development. All these things that infrastructure-wise that give these people a off-ramp out of homelessness and crime. So I think those are two different discussions to have. I mean, I know the immediate impact needs to be mitigated. And, that's more the enforcement side of it, or what you guys have to do. But if we're talking about solving this across the city, it's not, as you said, just a police problem. It's an infrastructure problem that it's going to take moves of government, private, and all together to make these solutions happen. So
Sure.
I think that's a separate conversation.
Yeah, and I could not agree more. Our enforcement efforts, they are truly a short-term solution. And I'm talking about a matter of hours solution sometimes. And that's not where we really want to be as a city. And, somebody's going to tell me at some point in time, you're not going to arrest your way out of this problem. And I'm going to go, you're right. We know this. It's been proven time and time again. And I'm not trying to arrest our way out of the problem. I'm trying to do our job at this point in time. I feel bad when citizens are coming to me saying, we need help. What are you doing? And then I'm like, well, here's what we can do. We can charge some folks when we have probable cause. And that's what we're going to do as an agency. Again, that's not meant to be heartless, I promise. If there was another route that I could go down I thought would be effective, I would absolutely do that tomorrow. But right now, that's the mission that we're on. It's really a Band-Aid solution that when it gets wet, it's going to come off.
I definitely feel safe in High Point compared to a lot of other places around in North Carolina. So, I think we're doing a good job. I think the purpose of this committee is always to just make sure there's nothing we aren't, looking into. I think the city manager's got a comment as well.
So in the term of short-term impacts, there's two things that have happened in the last week that might be in that category. One is the church on Quaker has been very proactive in wanting to clean up the area, and Public Services is working with the church to schedule that, and that should happen in a way so that the debris is removed, so that it's not attractive as a camp in the future, and then some of the undergrowth removed so that you can see it and it's eyes on the site, and so hopefully that in the immediate vicinity will make that a less attractive place for encampment. The second is that the property at 14 Gatewood is being leased to current Caitlin's house. November 30, that lease will end. So that current use in the way that it's being used should cease at that time. So we don't know what it is at the
You said November 30th.
October 30 is the lease should be terminated. We don't know what might happen with the house after that.
Sure.
But that's at least the end in sight.
Well, that's encouraging. I mean, that's a perfect example, like sometimes the churches and communities, I mean, can step up and solve a problem faster and better than we can, you know. I'm glad to hear that they took those measures.
Now, on the 410 Gatewood, just one comment. I don't think the intent of the leaseor is bad. I think it's very good. I think it's a very genuine thing. I mean, that's, you know, we need people at the table. They're at the table. I think you're going to have stuff like this when you're dealing with these issues. That's just the way it is to figure out how to manage it is what it comes down to. So the intent of the leasee is not a bad thing. I don't think that at all. The problems that come with it are a lot of times that's where you get your issues and neighbors. And I don't blame the neighbors for complaining. I would be too. I don't have an issue with that at all. Last thing before I shut up, I will tell you that right now, as of Monday, could have changed in the last couple of days. We've had a good couple of days. We're -9 on our impact crimes, which is what that means. When I say -9, that's you name it. Every big crime, if it's in an impact crime, and a person's crime, or a property crime, we're -9 for the year. And what that means is we're 9% down from where we were at this point in time last year. And believe it or not, last year we had a great year. So somehow we are managing to stay afloat. Now, the last 2 months are always busy for us. You know, I've spent many Christmases out on homicides and things like that. So I'm hoping not to replicate that in the last couple of months. That'll crush us. But your officers are doing a great job, just staying on top of it. I think you got to be proactive, though. You're going to have to. If you don't, they will take ground on you all day long, and you will play heck getting it back. So let's don't do that as a city.
I know at one point we talked about, even when we've had curfews and different things like that, but we've had to for different things. Do you think because we've been so proactive over the last couple of years that some of that crime is still taking place? It's just going to other sister neighboring cities and they just realize that this is not a safe place to commit their activities?
I do. I mean, I think, you know, a lot of our neighbors, if you read the news, I mean, I do too. It's the first thing I do every day. I want to see what's going on. I know what's happening here. I'll get the phone calls and texts and emails at night, but I want to see what's happening in neighboring cities. A lot of the people that I read names, I'm like, that's our guy.
Right.
Yeah.
It's their guy too. So we're all working together to try to really focus on these individuals. I don't want those people over there in this city or that city to be affected by this either. I mean, of course, my concentration is High Point, but there's still good people over there. I want them to be safe as well. But yes, I mean, you've heard me say it. I want bad guys, and that's why I'm referring to them. People can not like that all day long. But I want them to know when they cross into our city limits, they're like, all right, these boys and girls might stop me tonight. If I'm doing something wrong, there's a good chance it's going to be stopped. If it's a headlight out, you know, if your tags aren't on your car correct, yeah, well, get ready. You know, a lot of people are moving away from the motor vehicle violations. Just don't stop for this, don't stop for that, where you're asking for a problem. You're going to have a problem. I'm going to tell you right now, every district area that does that, I'll guarantee your crime's going to go up. Sure. Criminals cannot be allowed to move freely, man. Now, you can only stop them based on reasonable suspicion and probable cause, as long as you've got to stick to that. You can't just randomly stop people or do it on a hunch. It's got to be reasonable suspicion, probable cause. Stick to your guns on that, go by the law, and you'll be fine. But it's going to take the kind of officers who want to do that too, and that's sort of a dying breed.
If nothing else, Chief, I thank you for that number. I'm just encouraged to hear we're even down 9% year after year.
Let's talk in
That's
December.
awesome.
December 31, let's talk again, then I'll be happy.
That's
But it only
right.
starts over on the next day, so,
Couple more months.
yeah, give it a shot. Yes, sir.
All right, Chief, I think Ms. Wilson's got some presentation for us. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the council. I will give you real quickly the data from the point-in-time count. That is what the chief was referring to, and of course, that's done each year in January. One of the things that has never been done, because it is a countywide count, is it's not actually been broken down by Greensboro, the county, or High Point. So these will be comprehensive numbers for the entire count. But one of the things that I will go back and ask is if that can be broken down so that we can specifically get High Point numbers. But the count, of course, one of the issues when we talk about the point-in-time count, it's a 24-hour period, so just for one day. So there are a lot of things that can affect that, whether it may be extremely cold, whether it could be unseasonably warm, there may be inclement weather. So there are lots of things that can actually affect how that count turns out. But in January, the total number of households, there were 356 households. And this includes sheltered and unsheltered, because the homeless shelters, they also do a count on that particular night. The total number of persons, that was 426 people. Children under the age of 18, that was 63 children. Youth, well, I say youth between the ages of 18 and 24, young adults, that was 31, and then the number of persons over the age of 24, that was 332. So a total number of 426, and again, that's countywide for that point in time, that particular night. But just to tell you a little bit about some of the activities and some of the discussions and planning that has been going on when it comes to the homeless community. And I think it's, I'll just say, I think it's very good that we do have the county, Greensboro, and High Point at the table, because, we all have to collaborate and be in this together, because homeless people don't have an address, so they're very transitional. They're moving from Greensboro to High Point to Greensboro. So, for us to be at the table, I think trying to address these issues collaboratively is certainly commendable. But there are several groups, I will say, that have been meeting. Earlier in the year, around March, April, I believe it was, there was one particular group that was brought together, which was the initial group that included county commissioners, the mayor, the mayors, as well as city, county, and the city staff and county staff that were meeting, as well as the chair and past chair of the COC, the current chair and past chair. So that group basically has been meeting to discuss issues and trying to figure out, as they say, these long-term sustainable solutions that will make an impact, but there has not been anything that has been definitely agreed upon. And one of the things that was done was there was an RFI, a request for ideas. And basically what I understand that they wanted some of those out-of-the-box ideas, some of those things that would be long-term and would have some meaningful impact to the communities. What they basically received were applications or proposals to add staff or to increase capacity, repairs to buildings, those types of things. So there weren't really any ideas that came out of that RFI. However, the county has, as you may know, they set aside the $8 million of their ARPA funds that will hopefully be used for some of the ideas and things that are going to be coming. It will go to some of the agencies. They have done presentations, have submitted proposals. So it is a possibility that some of that funding will go to some of the agencies that applied, but they also are looking at trying to develop some other ideas. So that's one group that's been meeting. And then out of that group, there's the subset, the interlocal committee, which basically is county staff, staff from the two cities, as well as the COC current chair and past chair. And so some of the things that we specifically looked at were, of course, affordable housing and permanent supportive housing. One of the ideas, or one of the models that we have been looking at and have spoken with developers about is, of course, the conversion of hotels or motels to permanent supportive housing. And when we talk about public safety, because we know that some of these hotels are problem areas for the police department, so we do believe that that would be a partnership and a program that could actually be, have long-term impact, provide housing. It would provide those wraparound services, as well as help us to rid the community of some of the crime and other public safety issues that we're currently dealing with. And then, of course, affordable housing in general, whether it be the permanent supportive housing or just housing for low to moderate income individuals. So one of the things that the COC is currently working on is a needs assessment and gaps analysis. And that is one of the things that will basically give us the numbers, I would say more of the numbers as to how many units do we need and where are our gaps in the system. And when we look at the COC, of course, as the continuum, that is the planning body. And what they basically do is these are your boots on the ground agencies, for the most part, that are carrying out the day-to-day services. This is the planning body that oversees as far as how allocations of federal funds that come through the COC, how those funds are awarded to agencies, as well as funds through the Emergency Solutions Grant Program through the state. So as a planning body, this is the group that is supposed to look at ways, at projects, programs, developing programs, those types of things that actually house individuals and address the needs of the homeless community, whether it be the housing or those supportive services. And so that's kind of, I would say, the difference between the COC being a planning body versus these other committees, because the other committees are really looking at more specific things, not so much the programming aspect of it, which is really kind of where the COC really comes in, and that's the strong suit of most of those agencies, because a lot of them are supportive services providers. And the other thing that we've been looking at for that interlocal committee is the White Flag Initiative. One of the things that we're trying to do is come up with a comprehensive plan across the county for winter shelter White Flag. Because one of the things that we found out here in High Point, that our shelters actually use 3 different criteria in determining when they actually implement White Flag. You had some that when the temperature reached 40 degrees, they would implement White Flag. Others were doing 35. So what we're trying to do is come up with a plan, a comprehensive plan and protocols countywide, so that basically what's happening in Greensboro, that will be the same thing that would be happening in High Point. So that not only, so that the agencies know, so that whenever we're referring people, we know exactly where to send them and when to send them, what time it actually starts, those types of things. So we just want to have some type of comprehensive plan. The other issue that has really been more, I think, along the lines of with our the city, the 2 cities' attorneys, as well as the county, looking at ordinances and codes. We know that Greensboro did recently pass an ordinance that was regarding like blocking streets and sidewalks, which directly affected the homeless community in their downtown Center City area. And there are 3 other pilot programs that this particular committee has been looking at. One is for medical respite care, assertive outreach and case management, which is basically specifically targeting what they call individuals that are sleeping rough, which is of course under the bridges and the encampments, because what they find is that those individuals are the ones that have more cases of physical or mental health issues. And so a pilot program looking at that, as well as the outreach in our public libraries, having social workers that are engaged in the local libraries. So those are 3 pilot programs that this interlocal committee has really been kind of looking at and talking with other agencies about. So then again, now we have a new task force. As you may have seen, Commissioner Alston has proposed a new task force, which is the Homelessness and Housing Task Force. And that is being developed right now. And the interlocal committee is working on an RFP for a consultant. So what we're actually doing, we have been working on developing the scope of work, which would be for the consultant to facilitate or to develop and facilitate a multi-year framework to address cross-county homelessness. So that RFP should go out, I would think, within the next week or so for that. So those are 3 committees that are really kind of working interchangeably, intertwined, parallel, a little bit of everything. And so just trying to address these issues. And then, of course, just here in High Point, you have Open Door Ministries working on the day center and homeless shelter, emergency shelter project and plan. So those are just some of the updates as far as kind of what's happening around the homeless community and things that we're trying to engage in and be involved in, and hopefully come up with some long-term solutions.
Nina, did I see an announcement that we were going to do some pallet shelters?
We're not, Greensboro, they did provide $500,000 for 40 pallet homes. Now, Open Door Ministries, they do have pallet homes, and they've been proposing to use those for their winter shelter. But that is nothing that the city has actually
Well,
taken
yeah,
part
I
in. Is that
didn't-
what
I didn't
you?
mean the city, I meant.
Just
that
High
the
Point.
High Point was gonna have.
Yes, it's
some
open.
shelters.
Open Door Ministries, yes, they have, I think it's about 10. I don't remember the exact number, I'm sorry, but it's something like that. So what they've been trying to do is definitely work with our inspections department, because one of the things with the pallet homes is that is considered temporary housing, of course. So it can't be put in place. This is kind of the synopsis that I've gotten from our inspections director. They can only be used for up to 180 days per year. So it's not like they can put it up that it will be permanent housing, long-term housing. It has to be something that is erected and then after that 180-day period, taken down. It can't be taken down for a day and then put back up. It's 180 days out of 360. So that's one of the things, and just making sure that there are proper facilities for those that are staying there. So they're just trying to work with inspections to see how they can make that work.
Yeah, I know that it seems like there's a lot of duplicate efforts going on with a lot of the committees. They seem to be stacked on top of each other, but this is a multi-tiered problem. And it's a regional problem. And so as you try to act on this, the coordination between each of the municipalities is the only way to do it. Because there is, the thing about homelessness is that it's not static. It's not, those folks are transient, they move around. So just like crime, if you blunt it in one place, it's gonna move to another, and homelessness is just the same way. So the only way to really solve it is to have coordination across the municipalities and take a regional approach to it. So I know it sounds like a lot, but it's a multi-layered problem.
It definitely is, and I tell everybody, and it'll take many different ways to address it. There's not just one quick fix. There will have to be a lot of different ways that we address it.
Absolutely.
We've definitely looked into a lot of the stuff, like some of the panel homes and tiny homes and stuff like that with veterans. You guys know about the tiny homes project's going on, raise a lot of money for them. But the pilot home thing you're talking about, the 180-day restriction, is that a temporary put together type home or that's a mobile home, or what is that structure?
It's plastic, if I'm not mistaken, Greg, is that correct? It's like a plastic.
Plastic with foam on the inside of it, and they call it a
Yeah.
pallet home because it comes in on a
Yeah.
pallet. It's stacked.
Pallets, okay,
And you
You
can
just
put it, they're
go
white.
yeah.
You Google pallet homes, it'll pop up, but Open Door has 5.
Oh, is it 5? I'm sorry, okay, thank
And
you.
they think they have space for 4 to be erected and to be per code.
Mm-hmm.
So that 180 days is gonna be, of course, temporary and used during the winter time.
So does that restriction go with the structure or go with the land? I mean,
It goes with, it's on the structure because the structure has to comply with state building code.
right.
And it's the state building code that really dictates that you can't live in a plastic structure without ventilation.
Same thing we're talking about, well, you can't live in an RV, it's just a state building code, even though it does nothing for safety.
Yeah, it's not a permanent housing solution.
So Greg, unless I'm wrong, well, we met this morning, we had a meeting with Greensboro Day, so right now, the pallet houses are not allowed. Is that right? Yeah.
They are allowed temporarily. They can be erected temporarily, but they can't be used for long-term housing, just up to that 180 days.
I wasn't what I understood, and maybe I'm not getting the whole picture.
Yeah, I think where maybe some of the confusion has come into also is that Open Door has talked about possibly using those on vacant lots for long-term housing, and that's the thing that can't be done. They can't be used for long-term permanent housing, but they can be used for temporary emergency shelter. And so I'm thinking, Greg, aren't they also looking at putting it's 2 beds per home? So maybe that's where I was getting the 10 from,
So
10 people.
What I would suggest is that probably the way that Greensboro may be looking at this and the way that Open Door is understanding they can use it might be slightly different. My understanding with Greensboro is they were talking about restroom units, other cluster services that could be there, and I think that sounds more like the intent was to be year-round. So if that was their initial intent, that's not Open Doors' understanding of the current rules. What Nina shared is what they understand the rules are, and they're working with Reggie directly to make sure that they're compliant with the building code. And Tommy, we'll get together and talk about what you might have heard today, but our understanding sitting here today is that the temporary use is allowed as long as you're compliant with the building code.
And I think Open Doors' immediate use would be for winter. That's what I think they're looking more toward, is the winter shelter.
Yeah, I mean, if you only have 180 days, I mean, you have to, run those concurrently. So you're thinking that last last 2 months of the year, first month of the new year. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense.
Are some states relaxing on that stuff? I mean, just because, or should we even advocate at the state level? Because it's not a safety thing. I mean, like, we have temporary housing for veterans, but it's on a permanent housing structure that's been permitted for residential use.
Yeah.
We just want to let them live there for a few months at a time, and then we hopefully get them into a more permanent situation.
I think the difference is that you have a infrastructure set up that can simulate permanent residence.
Correct.
This is essentially a pop-up unit that is affixed close to a fixed resident, a building or, something that can have essential services and things like that. But unless we designate land and we build out that as a campus with all those services in it,
Yeah.
then it's temporary, it won't work.
I guess my point is, it makes more sense that the status of the person living there be temporary than the structure. You know what I mean? Because somebody shouldn't live there forever, long-term, because they don't deem that as being suitable for long-term residential living. Just the same rule applies to RV life, even though I know guys that got RVs that are nicer than my house, so it's just,
Well, and I think that's where the infrastructure comes in for the transitional life of the person. You have to have a plan to move them through that particular situation and out of homelessness. And so, whether that be drug treatment, whether that be education, temporary housing, whether that be job placement, transportation, all these services have to be combined in a centrally located place to be able to get this person ready to function on their own. And that takes a lot of time.
Sure.
If you're talking about someone who's had a drug addiction or dealing with addiction, and you're talking about putting them through something for 3 months, you're gonna see them again in 3 months.
oh, yeah.
This is getting someone out of this situation is a longer term, 2-3 year type of a touch system. So it's gonna take resources on the regional or even statewide scale to be able to do it at a high level.
I just think, there's definitely some roadblocks and things that I think some are for good reason, and some I think could be worked on, could be improved on, because there's assets, there's resources out there that could get somebody off the streets, out of the cold, out of the heat, 365 days a year, not just 180 days. So, I mean, I think that's you that's doing this on a day-to-day basis, and us advocating at the state level, saying to our state representatives that we feel there's a need to change some of these rules and laws if it means that we could solve a problem. We just got to sharpen our pencils. But no, I thank you for the update, and I think you're doing great work. I think you guys are passionate about solving all those issues. I just think that it still can get better,
Oh, sir.
So, Nina, let me ask you this. So, you said it has to be taken down, right?
Yes. That's my understanding. Does it have to be? Yeah, it has to be taken down
And I know
after
it's
180
temporary.
days. I don't think you can leave it erected.
But let's just say if this particular family or whatever is using it, and they can use it up to 180 days. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's my understanding it could be the same person. I don't think it has to be a different person for the 180 days. But
Then it
it's
has
just
to
the
be-
structure. It's tied to the structure, not the person.
Then it has to be taken down. And, I don't know, maybe I'm just having a moment, but, so if another family or person, individual, because emergencies come up throughout the year,
No.
Can't use it.
they can't.
Nope.
This is a different individual.
Yep. Goes with the
It's not
structure.
tied to the
It's-
person, it's not tied to
Yeah.
the person,
It's-
right, tied to
It's
the
the
structure.
structure can only be up for 180 days.
Right.
Irrespective of if someone needs it. Once it exhausts 180 days, it has to come down.
It's the same with, I know people that live in RVs full-time. It's just they can't do it at the same place for more than so many weeks at a time, then they're off to another place. And a lot of disabled veterans I know that just, that's their life, and that's what they do. But like I said, it's, some of the stuff that, I mean, I know it's all based on insurance claim. Insurance companies put pressure on fire marshal, the commissioner, who's the chief fire marshal of the state, who puts pressure on the state, and then the municipalities make it even more restrictive. It's all about insurance claims, but there's a lot of these rules that are not in the public's best interest all the time, and it just creates red tape, because I think what you and I are both thinking is, that's a structure that's being wasted, that could be somebody's house, but it can't be, and it's not because it's not safe, it's because there's a dumb rule out there.
So then I have one other question, okay? So, let's just say I don't need it for 180 days, okay? Because I have an exit plan, okay? Hit hard times, now I have a job, and so on. That house does not have to be taken down, or the temporary house does not have to be taken down. Another person could use it.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, if you only need it for 90 days, then
Yeah.
somebody else could come in and stay for another 90
I
days.
got you, okay. Make sure. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, even if, say for instance, if you had a period where your volume was high and you had them up for 30 days, and then all of a sudden that population dissipated,
Yeah.
you can take it down and then put it back up at another period of high volume for 30 days, or whatever it may be. As long as it doesn't eclipse 180 days in that year, then it's fine.
We can take it down and take a break and put it back up.
Yeah.
That's true.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Any other questions for other commissioners committee? But look, I think we addressed these topics because I think the public's come to us to talk about them, but I don't think we got to the end of the conversation by any means. I think we definitely got some good information for us to take to the council, and for those who are listening online or joining us today, I think it was helpful. I think what Ms. Wilson and what our chief shared should at least make us all a little less ignorant. We know a little bit more about what's going on and what we can do about it. So I would call that a success. I would imagine that we'll be circling back to this topic again, just probably I'd say in a few months, and we should every quarter almost, to make sure we're on top of it. But do I have any, well, you're the only one from my committee, so anyone else from this committee?
No question.
All right. In that case,